Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Aquarian Age podcast. My name is Sunny Khan and I am your host. A waxing gibbous moon in the sky at the moment, which is conjuncting the North Node. It was cloudy last night, but I did see the moon through the clouds, displaying that characteristic rainbowish kind of halo that lights up the clouds, and which is quite beautiful. And from time to time the clouds parted and I got a clear view, but I haven't had a view tonight. So we are approaching the full moon, which is due in a few days or so now, and will be the first full moon of the year. During the period of the half moon, the moon must conjunct Mars in the night sky for a few nights. It's about 4 degrees apart, which is visually quite close. If you hold your thumb vertically up at arm's length up at the sky, then the width of your thumb is about 2 degrees. So we're talking 2 thumb widths apart, which is pretty close. Anyway, one night I left my curtains open as I was in bed, so I could see the conjunction from my bed, and the light of the moon shone straight onto me, onto the bed, which was quite a nice experience. And I much prefer that kind of astrology to staring at sort of astrological software, which can really feel a bit soulless. But of course it is essential. But I do like to keep that living connection to the heavens alive. And it seems to me a very important part of astrology, which is often neglected, where one can directly experience the astral energies themselves rather than interpreting them by looking at software. So directly experiencing the astral energies through the night sky, that's a very sort of traditional kind of astrology, but it's much neglected, I think. And it's not the same as astronomy. Anyway, also in the celestial sphere we have the Sun and Saturn, which are conjunct at the moment. In December you may have got a chance to see the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in the night sky at the winter solstice. It was pretty spectacular. And yeah, wow, when on the actual solstice itself, wow, they were really close together. It was incredible. But after having had the two in the sky all year, wow, how fast they seem suddenly just to disappear as the conjunction, and then bang, they seem to just go. Well, now Saturn is behind the Sun, so it's definitely no longer visible in the night sky. And the same is true for Jupiter, which the Sun will conjunct in a few days as well. But sometime soon, maybe a couple of weeks, they should reappear again in the night sky, and in the morning sky, and join Venus. So that will be a great sight to look forward to, as will their conjunction with Venus. Mars is currently stationed equidistant between Uranus and Black Moon, and is conjuncting both of them in Taurus. I submitted my book The Nature of Things to Shambhala Publications when the Mars-Uranus aspect was exact. Now I wasn't particularly, I didn't think, I'll wait till it's exact and submit the book. No, I just suddenly found, I'll do it today, and thought, I wonder why that inclination came from. And so I checked and I thought, yes, must be the Mars-Uranus aspect, which I thought was noticeable because Uranus is very relevant to yoga. But it wasn't until around midnight that I submitted the book. I had to do it online for email, and it took me all day because they have a pro forma, which is quite an involved thing to fill out, lots of details they want. And after I did it, I thought I'll check to see what the transits are, what the moon's doing really is what I wanted to know. So I checked and I found that the transit of the moon was in conjunct or quincunx to my natal Pluto. So in evolutionary astrology, Pluto, among other things, can represent the soul, and an inconjunct can be a crisis aspect or just two things which are difficult to connect or don't quite kind of fit together. So I didn't think that was an aspect that heralded success for the book. I thought, why? And I wondered why would that be? So I thought, well, I've put the book as a PDF on my website under a Creative Commons license, so that it can be viewed and downloaded for free, and printed and distributed by anyone for free, as long as the purpose is non-commercial. And that's important to me because it's important that spiritual teachings are available for free to anyone, and that people can distribute it themselves without having to gain permission from central hierarchies who obstruct and who don't have the common good in mind. So that was very important to me, but it struck me that the inconjunct when I submitted the book to Shambhala for publication probably referred to that the fact that a publisher may not share my Aquarian ethos and therefore may not want to publish a book that is under a Creative Commons license. So I suspect that that's going to cause problems, but Shambhala are a more enlightened publisher, so hopefully they will see the higher path. And there is a lot of planetary energy in Aquarius too for the next couple of months, so I'm sure that's going to help. Now, current astrology aside, let's get on to the present episode. I do mention astrology a lot in these podcasts, and I'm aware that not everyone listening may be all that familiar with it. So I thought I ought to do an episode early on that focuses specifically on understanding the role of astrology in yoga. Of course, the title of the podcast is The Aquarian Age, so that's a title that is not likely to attract anyone that is anti-astrology. The Aquarian Age is primarily an astrological phenomenon. So it's a very New Age kind of term, and New Agey kind of people do generally practice astrology. So, or people who are open to New Agey kind of things generally are open to astrology. So in terms of my audience then, I can readily assume that there are no fundamental blockages to astrology, such as what exists in the wider society, which still openly mocks those who practice astrology and considers it something of a joke. So I thought I ought to do an episode on astrology for yoga that can act as the foundation for episodes to come. So that is this podcast. I'll first of all give an occult understanding of astrology, and then I will explain the primary celestial bodies in yoga, their astral energies, and how they pertain to the Kundalini yoga that I teach. I should add that the episodes of this podcast are available as transcripts on my website if you want to read them. So that can be a lot of information given out over the podcast, and I know for me personally it really helps if I can read something as well, so I can digest it and make notes and contemplate it. So www.aquarian-age.co.uk is the website, and if you go to the podcast section you'll find the transcripts there. So let's begin with an occult theory of astral influences. And what do I mean by an occult theory? Well, we want the theory to answer the question, how is it that the movements of the planets and other objects in the solar system can have such a profound and far-reaching influence upon our inner and outer lives? And not just the objects in our solar system, of course, the stars and the various things in the universe, all of those things. So firstly, let me say that the question is really made impossibly difficult to answer when we view the planets as bodies of matter, as most people do. Okay, so that is bodies made of a matter which is inert, which has no psychic properties whatsoever, such as feelings, volition, or memories, and which is just mechanical in its action. It may surprise you to learn that there is at least one astrophysicist that has written a book on why he thinks stars may be alive and conscious, and he's written that book based upon decades of his observations of stars and star clusters within the galaxy, and his published work in the scientific literature. And there are also scientists who ponder whether the sun is conscious. So they do so because the human brain produces complex electromagnetic fields that seem to be a correlate for consciousness. That is, it seems as though they are intimately linked in some way to consciousness and may be the same thing. And when scientists observe the sun, what they see is a fantastically complex electromagnetic phenomenon. It really is quite astonishing. So it's natural then for science to ponder whether the sun is in fact conscious, and whether those complex electromagnetic fields that it produces are not a correlate for its own consciousness, for the existence of its consciousness. And of course, if the sun is conscious, then there's no problem with embracing astrology. We know from experiments in parapsychological research conducted in laboratories around the world for the past 150 years, using things like the Ganzfeld experiment or random number generators and so on, we know from all this that minds can influence other minds, and that minds can influence matter, and that minds can even influence events in future and in the past, which is very difficult to understand, but which we can call an acausal or anomalous influence. And it's also worth noting that the fact that events in the past and future can be influenced is also established in quantum physics, with an experiment called the Delayed Choice Quantum Eraser Experiment. Long word, but the quantum eraser experiment is one type of experiment, and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment is a kind of variant of it. And it's only recently been technically possible to perform, which has been done in the last sort of 10 years or so. So it's quite recent experiment. So from all this parapsychological research, if the sun is conscious, then it stands to reason that it can influence our mind and the minds of all other sentient life. And because it is so vast compared to the Earth, never mind when compared to a tiny human mind, because it is so vast, it stands to reason that its influence would be equally vast and could account for the occult influences of astrology. And by occult influence, what I mean is an invisible influence. It's one that's not understood and cannot be seen. That's what is meant by the use of the word occult. We don't see the origins of the astral influences. We only experience their effect. We only experience their effects. So the what actually causes them is occulted to our eyes. So this theory of complex electromagnetic fields, then, as a correlate of consciousness, is an interesting line of inquiry as regards astrology, because it can explain in a very broad manner how the sun may influence not only our minds but physical events as well, and it can also explain anomalous or acausal events such as synchronicities, which are often associated with astrological transits. So it's a very interesting line of speculation, but in my mind these kind of physical theories fail as a full occult theory of astrology, and that is because all of the celestial bodies seem to exert an influence in astrology, yet they don't all have such complex physical fields as stars do. So if we think, for example, of Chiron, which is basically an irregular shaped rock, and if we compare Chiron with the sun, or if we compare Mercury with the sun, well, the electromagnetic fields of Chiron and Mercury are far simpler, and I'm not aware that anyone would suggest they're complex enough to postulate consciousness as a correlate. Yet in astrology, these are still powerful celestial influences. They're equally able to influence our minds and external events. Similarly, we know that physical fields such as gravitation or electromagnetism are attenuated over distance, so they get rapidly weaker and weaker the further away from the source you get. Does not seem to be the case for astral influences, which do not seem to be appreciably weaker the further away they are. So we don't say, for example, Pluto is further away from the Earth than Mercury, therefore Pluto is weaker. No, we don't say, astrologers don't say that at all. Okay, so distance doesn't seem to have any effect on the strength of an astral influence. So trying to explain astrology using physical fields like magnetism or gravity seems to me to be a bit of a dead end. But the idea of a field of some sort is not, and we'll see later that in fact modelling astral influences as fields goes back over 1,000 years to the early Islamic occult philosophers. So we have dispensed with the idea of physical fields as an explanation for astral influences, or as an explanation for astrology. As a complete explanation for astrology, they may explain some things, but as a complete explanation, no, they fail pretty spectacularly for the reasons that I gave. In the last episode, I talked about the psychoid aspect of the archetype, which refers to the fact that the world that we experience is in fact psychic in nature, like a dream world. I say like a dream world rather than is a dream world, because I am not suggesting that reality is a dream. I am simply comparing one example of a psychic experience, that of a dream, with another, that of reality. It is a comparison only, because the world, despite the fact it's psychic in nature and is like a dream, is also objectively real, which a dream isn't. You dream your dream, nobody else dreams it, okay? Whereas the world is experienced by many people, and the things and events in it are objectively real. And there are in fact many key differences between reality and a dream, which I'll talk about in future episodes. So it's for comparison only, so that we can understand what it means to say that reality is psychic in nature. It's kind of like we can compare it to a dream world or something like that. So in the psychoid aspect of the archetype, we have a conception of the world that could encompass occult phenomena such as astrology in their entirety. But it does so only by understanding the world as psychic in nature and not physical. And this is in fact what Dane Rudhyar proposed, the astrologer Dane Rudhyar proposed when he united astrology with the Jungian archetypes. So we have seen that trying to explain occult phenomena using physical parameters such as electromagnetic fields is far too primitive. The world is not material in nature, so let's not bother. Instead, we are going to use psychic parameters, and to do so within the context that the world is psychic in nature. That is, it's like a mind, or it's like a dream world. And remember, these are analogies only, not literal descriptions, okay? We have types of causation that are acausal, such as the synchronicity. That is, we experience them as somewhat magical, inexplicable, maybe even mind-blowing or out of this world. But we can understand that they derive from a deeper layer of the psyche, where the boundary between psyche and what we perceive as matter is not as fixed as it appears to be in our experience. Now that's important because astrology is an example of an acausal influence. It's an example of an acausal influence. Understanding that is the basis upon which I'm going to explain the occult philosophy of astrology. So let's just look a little bit more about acausal influence. In the world, we have two types of primary influence. The classification of the influences in the world, we can classify them into two types that we can call masculine and feminine. The masculine energies are very ordered and amenable to reason, and the world of matter is predominantly a manifestation of masculine energies. The feminine energies are very disordered, inexplicable, and not amenable to reason, and the world of the occult is predominantly a manifestation of feminine energies. An acausal phenomenon like synchronicity is a typical example of a feminine energy. And remember, the terms masculine and feminine are used here in a manner similar to the ancient Chinese concepts of yin and yang. That is, they are used to describe the fundamental properties of psychic energy. Now, I could use the words yin and yang, but that would be culturally inappropriate, as I am not an expert on Chinese philosophy, so I don't really know what those words mean in Chinese philosophy. So for that reason, I'm just using the words masculine and feminine and comparing them to yin and yang. Now, where astronomy is a masculine discipline, astrology is a feminine discipline. That is, we are dealing with very different energies when we come to understand the two subjects. This is important to understand because while astronomy is amenable to order and causal explanations, as found, for example, in the equations of physics, astrology is not. You'll never, even in principle, be able to subject astrology to equations. It's like trying to fit a square into a round hole. Doesn't work. So when we come to an occult philosophy of astrology, we must first of all start from this perspective. This philosophy of ours is going to be quite limited in scope, because astrology is first and foremost understood using the intuitive faculties, and while its phenomena, such as synchronicity, can be named and pointed out, they cannot be fully explained, because we are dealing with a fundamentally irrational phenomenon that is a manifestation of the feminine energies. Nonetheless, if we make the comparison again with yin and yang, we know that symbol, yin and yang symbol, is kind of a circle divided into a black half and a white half, and even in the black half there's a white bit, and even in the white bit there's a black bit. So even within the irrational there is some order, just as there is some disorder within the rational. So what I want to do is to focus on the ordered aspects of astrology and begin there with an occult philosophy. So in physics, the region of physical influence around a celestial body such as a planet is modelled as a fluid. So if we think of the gravitational field or the magnetic field around a planet, it's modelled as a fluid, and field theories based upon the motions of imaginary fluids are used to model these influences very successfully. So here's our opening into occult philosophy. We are going to use fields and the concept of fields to describe the astral influences. But rather than physical fields of influence, that is, fields which influence physical objects only, such as gravity, we are going to describe psychic fields of influence. These are fields that influence the psyche and the psychoid nature of reality. Now you'll need to sit and think upon this a little bit for it to sink in. The fields that the celestial bodies radiate are psychic in nature, and they affect the psyche and the psychoid nature of reality. And I talked about the psychoid nature of reality in the last episode. These psychic fields of influence, which flow like fluids, can be used to describe the mechanics of astrology. Just as we can imagine a planet radiating gravitational and electromagnetic fields of physical influence and use that to explain physical motions, so too we can imagine the celestial bodies radiating psychic fields of influence and use that to explain astrology. Now I say imagine, but this is not an exercise of the imagination, okay? If you practice astrology, then you know that the celestial bodies transmit psychic influences. So it is a fact that can be directly verified through experience. The celestial bodies transmit psychic influences. That means there is a region of psychic influence around a celestial body, just as there is a region of physical influence around a bar magnet or a planet. So we have established the existence of a psychic field. That is, we have a fluid-like flow of some kind, a flow of psychic substances that transmit influences from the celestial bodies to us. Now, if you imagine standing in a river, then what you'll see around you is water flowing by in a state of constant change and flux. So the person standing in the water is like our mind, and the motions of the water as it flows by are like our transient thoughts and feelings, which are in a constant state of change and flux and experiences. Now, if you think of yourself as a spirit situated in the flow of the astral energies radiated by the celestial bodies, then this flow is a flow of psychic energy, and just as our psyche can produce dreams of worlds of matter, so too can these astral energies create also the physical world and the life experiences we have in them. As the flow of psychic energy changes, so too does our experience. These astral energies are radiated by the celestial bodies, but the manner in which they operate is not amenable to rational explanation. They are inherently irrational, but they have their rational component at their core, and that is what I am describing. Now, this is not my theory. It's not just something I've invented, okay? This occult philosophy was first written down well over 1,000 years ago by an occult philosopher called Al-Kindi, who lived in Baghdad. He called it the theory of astral rays, and I've simply updated that theory using the modern vernacular of physics in order to explain this occult theory, I hope with greater clarity. So the theory of astral rays. Now, rays is a word for the direction of a wave, like the waves on the surface of a fluid. If you imagine dropping a stone into the centre of a calm pond, then waves radiate out from the centre. Now, these are the rays. These are the rays of energy that radiate out and cause the water to move up and down. So Al-Kindi's theory of astral rays is really a fluid theory of astral phenomena. But the rays are psychic in nature. The fluid is psychic in nature and has incredible properties. This occult theory was widely adopted by the medieval and Renaissance astrologers of Europe as astrology came back into Europe from the Islamic world. So astrologers such as John Dee or Marsilio Ficino, for example, and it's been a huge influence on occult practice and philosophy. Though that influence seems to have kind of vanished in the modern era of astrology, when astrology came back in the sort of modern era. This theory also explains the aspects where the astral energies are amplified or take on different aspects depending on their relationship to each other. A conjunction, a square, a trine, and so on. We know with wave phenomena that waves interfere with each other, creating fixed patterns that can be observed, just as we observe the aspects in astrology. This ancient occult philosophy mirrors the modern field theories which account for the gravitational and electromagnetic influences, except that in the case of astral rays, we are dealing with a psychic energy. That is, this energy has volition, has thought, it has memories. It is more like a living energy than the rather mechanical physical energies which behave very robotically. It's also an energy with many other incredible properties, such as the property of synchronicity. Because the astral energies are alive, they are not amenable to reason, just as the personality of a person is not amenable to reason. You cannot describe the personality of a person with equations or explain their actions using logic. Similarly, the astral energies are sentient and require the development of occult practices in order to commune with them and establish a working relationship. That is the theoretical basis of astrology and most occult practice, such as the use of crystals, which are also conduits for astral rays and can be used in conjunction with astrology to create really powerful practices. So I hope that has been a useful introduction to the occult theory of astrology. I'll remind you that there is a transcript of these podcasts available on my website. The website is www.aquarian-age.co.uk, and go to the section titled Podcasts. And I also have a section titled Yoga, which in the near future will have a set of essays there containing more detailed information about the occult theory of astrology for those interested. Now, before I finish on the occult philosophy of astrology, I want to talk about astrology and free will. Well, it's just briefly, because it's a topic for another episode, and I have some great information to share. So I'm going to save it for another episode, but just to say briefly that astrology does not remove free will. That is, accepting the comprehensive influences of the celestial bodies does not mean you have to abandon free will, because we are dealing with influences. Your friends are influences. Just because they influence you in the formative events of your life does not mean you do not have free will. And it is the same with the celestial bodies, though a little bit more complex. You are a spirit, and you are subject to the astral influences, but they do not rule over you, though the malefic ones will try to. So you have your own being, your own mind, and from the flow of astral energies that come your way, which bring a great deal of your inner and outer life experiences, you are able to make choices. And in that way, you can see that free will is not challenged. So I have given a brief introduction to you to an occult theory, or to an occult philosophy of astrology. And I hope that puts astrology and the practice of astrology and yoga into a more coherent framework. That is, one has a clearer conception of what you're getting involved in when you begin practicing astrology, and of its profound nature. Through the astral rays, you are communing with the psychic fields that these bodies radiate, and which have profound properties. Now, let me move on to giving some background. On the key astrological influences in the Kundalini Yoga that I teach. I mentioned in the first episode that Jupiter is the seed of yogic consciousness. So let me first of all expand on that. In Western astrology, Jupiter is seen as a benefic influence and described as jovial, helpful, and expansive. In our psyche, these benefic Jupiter energies bring to life a very good-natured, archetypal personality that we can call our Jupiter personality, part of our collective unconscious or our psychic inheritance as a human being. They will also manifest all the Jupiterian experiences in our life, that is, the sort of life experiences and areas of life that are traditionally associated with Jupiter. Now, in the Kundalini Yoga that I teach, what comes to fruition through practicing this yoga is an astral seed of Jupiter, a seed which has cosmic origins. So the archetype of yoga is in fact an archetype of Jupiter. The archetype of yoga is in fact an archetype of Jupiter. This archetypal seed is a part of the collective unconscious that we all have, and then is activated when the right conditions are met. And I mentioned in the first introductory episode that the unique Jupiter transits of 2020 will have ripened this archetypal seed of yoga in some number of people, so that in 2021 it will begin to develop and grow. So the yogic consciousness that eventually flowers is a Jupiterian archetype. Of course, that explains the beauty of realizing oneself in yoga and why yogic consciousness is often referred to as a lotus flower, as it means that when the archetypal seed flowers, it unites your whole personhood towards the common good, and only the higher energies of Jupiter can achieve this. Uniting your whole person towards the common good. And please bear in mind that when I refer to Jupiter, I am not talking about the Roman deity, which was quite a primitive manifestation of Jupiter energy. I am talking about a source of astral energy which can manifest in many ways. The Roman names are just there for historic reasons. The astral energies of Jupiter are associated with the second chakra, and when our yogic consciousness begins to ripen, it does so from the second chakra. And what eventually unfolds is an archetypal Jupiter personality, but one with cosmic origins. That is, it has not evolved with life on Earth, but as galactic origins, whereas, for example, the Jupiter that the Romans described evolved with life on Earth, had terrestrial origins. So it begins to unfold from the second chakra like a plant and goes on to embrace the other chakras and transform them so that the other chakras become its leaves, so to speak. In this way, the yogic seed eventually embraces your entire being. For that reason, as this transformation unfolds, there will be processes of transformation going on at every chakra, as each chakra is transformed according to the cosmic design. To understand what is going on in greater detail, you will need to look at your natal chart and at all aspects to your natal Jupiter and transiting Jupiter. So, for example, when I recorded the first episode of this podcast, for example, transiting Jupiter was conjunct my North Node in Aquarius. So this podcast is a key vehicle for my own evolution and for transmitting yogic teachings on the age of Aquarius. This process of transformation that begins at the second chakra is a process that will go on for many years, over a decade and maybe all your life, though the most intense period will be the first 5 to 10 years. With Kundalini Yoga, and especially the first 5 years, with Kundalini Yoga, this process of transformation occurs at a very rapid pace and places a great demand upon the individual. Because your body has its origins on the earth, there will be many inner obstacles to this process of transformation that will attempt to block or stop the transformation from happening. These difficulties give rise to all the associated horror stories that accompany the practice of Kundalini Yoga. The difficulties can at times mirror states of psychosis or of schizophrenia in their symptoms, and can be really very difficult and extremely frightening. The difference, however, is that the practitioner is not a psychotic or a schizophrenic, but is coming up against severe resistance from the chakras of the body. This resistance is attempting to destroy the will of the practitioner so that they stop the practice altogether. I will say more on that in future episodes, but it is something that you should bear in mind. This is not an easy path at all, but a great challenge. Another property of Jupiter is its expansiveness. Jupiterian energy expands and amplifies whatever it touches. With this new cosmic Jupiter energy that brings the consciousness of yoga, this expansiveness manifests as an extraordinary power of vision into the inner world, not only of yourself, but of others. In Jungian psychology, for example, there is the shadow, the dark and malevolent aspects of ourselves, and as well as the good parts of ourselves that are repressed or unacknowledged. So this new Jupiter, this new cosmic Jupiter energy really magnifies all psychic energies, bringing them all into consciousness, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That is what really enables a transformation to proceed so fast, but it has a critical potential downfall, which the practitioner of yoga can avoid if they're aware of it and guard against it. When the darkness within us is magnified in this way, it takes a tremendous motivation to prevent it from acting out. If you have ever spent any time reading about the lives of those who have experienced the yogic transformation, then you will know that there is a period during which it is difficult to tell the yogi from someone who is insane, or violent, or angry, or evil, or a drunkard, and so on. The darkness within them has been magnified, and they may for a time have been overcome by it. And sadly, there are many cases of those who are totally overcome. Kundalini Yoga does not have a definite outcome. Yoga is a dangerous and difficult transformation where the outcome is not certain. For that reason, you must have a very strong intention to the common good, for ultimately the final outcome rests on the strength of this motivation, and whether this motivation is stronger than the dark, unconscious motivations within you that will come to the fore and seek dominance. That is why the real Kundalini Yoga only works with the Jupiterian seed, because it is only Jupiter who has this core of motivation to help others for the common good. So let's suppose you have a strong tendency towards egoism and hubris, but that it is unconscious and you are not aware of it. When the astral rays of this cosmic Jupiter energy starts to impact on your being, this part of your psyche will become expanded. Now, hubris and egoism are already kind of expansive energies. So when this cosmic Jupiter energy hits them, it's a dangerous combination, and all too often it leads to what you can call the God or Messiah complex, where the individual thinks they are the chosen one of some God, or are a Messiah of some sort, or a new Buddha or a Jesus. If it goes unchecked, this intention will become the stronger intention, and the yogic energies will be channeled not into the yogic transformation, but into a guru cult, where the guru is worshipped as a living God or a divine Messiah. Does that sound familiar? Well, witness most of the guru cults of India and Tibet, where the gurus are worshipped as deities and sit on thrones with thousands of followers. It is not yoga. It is an obscene catastrophe of what can go wrong when a practitioner has not developed a strong enough intention to the common good and has been overcome by their own bad influences. Another key aspect of Jupiter is the role as a teacher and the use of metaphor to teach rather than logic. At present, for example, we have Jupiter trine Uranus in the celestial sphere. So this is an excellent aspect when you could expect to receive some cosmic teachings on yoga. Uranus, as we will see later, is the cosmic guru who will guide you to the final attainment of direct seeing. So I have spoken about how Jupiter is central to the development of yogic consciousness, how the transformation proceeds from the second chakra and envelops all the other chakras, how the Jupiter energies at their core act for the common good, and how this intention and being conscious of this intention is critical for the success of the transformation. I've talked of the obstacles in the body and the very difficult states that arise as a result and that mirror severe mental health, and of the expansive nature of this cosmic energy and how it can amplify your flaws and lead to disaster if left unchecked. There's a lot there to digest. I want next to talk about the Shakti, which when it comes to Kundalini Yoga is known as the Kundalini Shakti, or just the Kundalini. This benefic Kundalini Shakti is like a plant, like a vine, that grows up through the chakras. The malefic Kundalini Shakti is a serpent that grows up through the chakras. Many people today practice a malefic Kundalini Yoga without knowing it. The various systems of Tantra, for example, are, to my experience, almost exclusively of the malefic form. The authentic Kundalini Yoga does not involve any sex. Neither does it try to win people over by promising bliss or ecstasy or other spiritual highs, and neither does it involve worshipping idols or joining cults. Yoga is not a hedonistic joyride, and those led on by intentions that seek to attain bliss or ecstasy will, unbeknownst to them, be having their unconscious malevolent intentions ripened, and their yogic potential will ultimately be destroyed and turned into a spiritual high. They're in it for spiritual highs, and their potential will be converted into that, and that is the end of their cosmic evolution. Similarly, hierarchies have no place in yoga. The core seed of yoga is a desire to benefit the world, to benefit the common good, not to dominate it. Those who worship idols, statues of deities or whatever, and who join religious hierarchies do so because they want someday to be worshipped and to dominate others in their turn. This intention will also ultimately destroy their yogic potential and end their cosmic evolution. So that is the Shakti of the serpent, and that is what to avoid. The real Kundalini is a power of nature, and it will come to you as a vine of some sort or a plant. Your sexual energies will be required to bring the transformation to fruition, so you will need a strong motivation to the common good in order to give up your sexual life. There are no highs or states of ecstasy or bliss. There are realizations to be attained and higher states of consciousness to achieve. Whether you are happy or not is a complex equation, and it's not something that yoga can address immediately. That happiness or unhappiness can have its roots in many lifetimes. All yoga can do is make the individual aware of the causes of happiness and of unhappiness, so that they can ultimately free themselves. And it can also protect you from the worst of your bad karma. Whether you can free yourself in your present life or not is not easy to determine. And what I mean is, whether you can be happy in your present life or not is not easy to determine. So one needs to be realistic and not expect yoga to provide your dream life. This is a very corrupt world, and there are far too many obstacles. So one does not pursue yoga to attain happiness in this life, for that may not be attainable. Yoga, remember, is about achieving the state of direct seeing, a profound state which has many benefits, one of which is, yes, ultimately you are released from states of suffering, but whether that occurs in this life or not depends on many factors, too numerous to list here. So we have learned something about the Kundalini energy. The Kundalini energy of the yoga I teach is associated with the transits of Black Moon Lilith, a very dark feminine energy, and by dark I mean unconscious. I don't mean evil or bad. This is a feminine energy from the deep unconscious of our being, from the very source of life itself. The energies of Black Moon Lilith are also associated with the second chakra, so they form a natural synthesis with the Jupiter energies, a yin and yang type of synthesis. Where Jupiter forms the seed, the energies of Black Moon Lilith form the embryo which surrounds that seed and which will bring it to life, just as the body of a plant brings a flower to life. For that reason, this Kundalini energy is critical to the success of the yogic transformation. Where the yogic Jupiter energies are cosmic in origin, the Kundalini energy is very much terrestrial in origin. This is a plant Shakti, and that is why I said that I teach an earth-centered Kundalini yoga. Only those who have developed a kind and benefic intention towards the earth, its beings and its ecosystems will have the potential to develop this Kundalini energy within them. This Kundalini yoga is a rapid means of yogic transformation for those who have developed a very strong intention to benefit the earth and to protect its ecosystems. Another important astral influence in yoga that I should mention briefly is Vesta. In the more ancient Greek form, Vesta was known as Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home. It is from the ancient Greek term for hearth and home that the word eco, for ecology or eco-warrior, derive. Thus the modern-day eco-warrior is, at least in part, an expression of the astral energies of Hestia or Vesta for the hearth and home. For the hearth and home is ultimately the earth itself. And it is for such individuals with a strong love of the earth and horror of what is happening today that this Kundalini yoga comes. It comes from the ecology of the earth itself, from the plants and the living conscious Shakti that underpins them at a much deeper level of being. And it comes primarily to protect those who wish to live in symbiosis with the planet itself and not as a domineering devil. That loving intention to protect takes the form of the powerful Kundalini, which will transform the individual, male or female, into a yogi. So that is Black Moon Lilith and the importance of the transits of Black Moon Lilith in the Kundalini yoga that I'm teaching. It's a Shakti. Now I'm aware that other astrologers will talk about Black Moon Lilith and talk about, for example, stories in the Bible about Lilith. That's something completely different. Remember, these celestial bodies can manifest in many different ways. So I'm talking about something very different. So it's a Shakti from the biosphere of the earth itself, a protective Shakti that seeks to evolve as much of humanity as it can to achieve the yogic state of being and to live in symbiosis with it consciously. It is through these transits that you'll be able to commune with or channel the astral energies of this Kundalini energy directly. as I'm doing right now in recording this podcast while Mars is conjuncting Black Moon Lilith. So I have covered Jupiter and Black Moon Lilith and their central role in the yogic transformation. And I mentioned very briefly Vesta. Before I end, I want also to briefly mention Uranus and its role in yoga. Of course, there are many other important astrological bodies who play an important role in yoga, and in future podcasts I'll talk about them. But the triplet of Black Moon Lilith, Jupiter and Uranus are critical. They are the three main celestial influences of this yogic transformation. So let me now end with just a few words about Uranus. In modern day solar astrology, Uranus is known as the cosmic liberator. And that really is the role of Uranus in the yogic transformation. It acts as the guru and provides key wisdom and guidance that may be in the form of a person or a teacher such as myself, or it may be several people, or it may be books and lectures and so on. The important thing to be aware of is that whatever form it manifests in, you are ultimately communing with the astral rays of the galaxy itself. These are not terrestrial energies. For that reason, you'll need to develop some kind of occult practice in order to protect that link, to amplify that link, to ward off interference, and to commune. Now, the interference. That interference will mostly come in the form of fake gurus and deities, deceptive astral rays. A classic fake deity are the Buddhas of the Buddhist tradition, who pretend to be the source of the yogic transformation, and in that way subdue many people into worshipping them, and thereby block their yogic development. In actual fact, these Buddhas are simply animal instincts, like the alpha male instinct of apes or elephants, that have been empowered by the Jupiter energies, and which have dominated the aspiring yogi. In other words, their own tendency to dominate others has resulted in their own domination by their own malefic instincts. It's a sad state of affairs. I understand that for many that may be shocking or difficult to accept. There is great wisdom contained in the Buddhist tradition, and it's not just the Buddhist tradition, it's the Hindu tradition as well. I could equally be talking about Hinduism, but there's also any of the world's religions. I'm not just picking on Buddhism and Hinduism, but Buddhism and Hinduism are specifically associated with yoga. So there is great wisdom in those traditions, no doubt about it. They have important teachings on yoga, but there's also great corruption, and the hierarchies of power and domination are a corruption. Wielding power over others is not yoga. It is a primitive animal instinct. Being subdued by idols and prostrating before them, making offerings and so on, is slavery. It's not yoga. That is what it looks like to be enslaved, not liberated. So the cosmic energies of Uranus also have their dangerous counterparts. Those who have been abused in their early life and have thus become accustomed to that abuse and are likely unconscious of it will be very vulnerable to this deception, as they lack the boundaries of a healthy person, the self-respect and self-value that are necessary to see these practices for what they are, an abomination to the human spirit and the development of yoga. Yoga is about love, respect, caring for others and protecting yourself and others from malefic influences. It is not about worshipping gurus or statues. So I have come to the end of this podcast. I have explained an occult philosophy of astrology that can be used in yoga to understand what one is dealing with, and I have also explained some of the key celestial bodies whose astral rays are critical in the Kundalini yoga that I teach. That is all for today. I hope you have found it nourishing and have plenty to think about, and I will speak again soon.